Everybody hear me? Sweet. So, who was here 9 months ago for my last talk? Please raise your hand. Cool. So, I gave a talk 9 months ago on React hooks, so it was like really over the top excited, as it should have been. You know, I had like a lot of energy that day, and I probably talked to a lot of you, and like you didn't understand anything I was saying. That's okay. I'm here to tell you how the last 9 months have gone. So I made a little trailer for my talk. I hope this works. Oh no, the audio's not going through everything. You know what's going on now. That was fun. By the way, I did not make that by hand. I showed it to my wife and she's like, really, that's what you've been doing today? I was like, no, that was like a cool generator thing. You can Google it, it's pretty cool. So if you don't know me, my name's Tanner Linsley. That's where I am everywhere on the internet. So come find me. I like to chat. I even respond to DMs, so I'm not above that. I like to live stream occasionally in the morning, really early, like 7 a.m. because that's the only time I have. So, yeah, I don't understand why I can't see my presenter notes. You know? That's what I want to know. I don't want to mirror. Stop mirroring. Sweet. All right. I'm talking about React hooks again, but this time it's like, you know, maybe not as excited, but I'm still really excited about them. If you don't know what React hooks are, they're just functions. They're composable functions that help you control state and effects in React without components. It's really nice. So what do hooks do for you? What do React hooks do for you? In my opinion, they give you more of this stuff. They're easier to write and maintain than non-hook code. I think they're way more shareable inside your own project and in the open source world. I believe they produce smaller bundles, and I think that they are way more fun than any other. I was super stoked about Angular 1x. Sorry to bring up Angular again. Angular 1 was like really freaking magical. And and then I was like, whoa, this digest cycle sucks. And then I found React, and I was like super happy with React. And then I feel like React hooks are magical again. They're really fun. And it also gives you less of these things. So I am highly opinionated about Redux. But I also believe that hooks give you a little bit more power over your own UI and your own logic and everything that ultimately lets you rely less on third-party components. And I also believe that they lead to less bugs. Not the type of bugs that TypeScript would help you eliminate, but I'm talking about like bugs that that would make it past TypeScript. Hello. Like usability bugs, like, oh, hey, your TypeScript app compiles, but it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Those types of bugs. I think that React hooks produces less of those. So I work at Nozzle. I'm one of 3 co-founders, and we've been going for about 5 years. Nozzle is we basically reverse engineer. Hello? All right, I don't know what's going on, but we basically reverse engineer Google, and you can't see anything I'm doing. Goodness sakes, people, what is going on? This whole multi-screen thing is probably not the best idea. Hold on, I got this. Yeah. All right. You can see it. All right. I can't see it though. So, all right. Yeah. So we reverse engineer Google. Basically, we want to know everything there is to know about Google, and we provide that data back to companies that care about that kind of thing, like people that want to rank high and have great SEO. So we are a very, very sophisticated data provider on top of information about Google. But what comes with that is a lot of complexity around, oh my goodness, guys, what are you doing to my presentation? I don't know what you're doing. Okay, hold on. This might make me a little more nervous to present, but I'm just going to mirror and not have any of my notes. There we go. All right, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Sweet. Back to Keynote. All right. So at Nozzle, since React Hooks came out 9 months ago, I have basically rewritten almost every single line of code in Nozzle. I started by doing about 80% of it in about 3 or 4 weeks after React Hooks came out, because I was a little overzealous. And I made some big mistakes. Thinking I knew everything about hooks. And over the last 9 months, I've spent a lot of time correcting those mistakes. You can even hear about some of those mistakes in Kent C. Dodd's talk at Utah.js called Hook Pitfalls. We're all learning more about hooks as we go. But how has it transformed Nozzle over the last 9 months? Primarily, these 4 things have changed completely in Nozzle, which is not a massive application. It's about 40,000 lines of code, but with prettier, how do you really measure lines of code, right? But all of our state management has changed. We use Redux. We do not use Redux anymore. We used to rely on a ton of third-party components for date pickers and actual components that were rendering markup, and we no longer rely on any third-party components. Every single piece of markup and style properties of the entire app are owned by Nozzle. Also, a lot of the side effects and the performance of the app were greatly improved because of hooks. Mostly because of reducing the types of bugs that ESLint and the React Hooks ESLint plugin can take care of for you, and also the fact that you can't catch those kind of bugs when you're using classes. Also, the other part that's transformed is basically the entire business logic layer inside of Nozzle has transformed into a massive collection of custom hooks. I would wager that a lot of that business logic for many companies and many projects is all about CRUD, and I'll talk a little bit about that today too. But everything else, as far as like showing, loading, or notifications or alerts, or moving around the app, and even history and location management have all changed. So state management primarily has changed because I no longer want to use Redux and Friends. I'm highly opinionated about state management, and I believe I've reached a deterministic state that I am a hard pass for Redux. I'm a hard pass for Redux and MobX and basically any other external state manager. I don't really feel like I want anything else managing my state anymore now that I have hooks, and I'm going to show you why. So this is the user reducer hook in React. Who's seen this before? Okay, if you haven't seen this, you can basically create your own little reducer with the use reducer hook. And it gives you the state of your reducer, and it gives you a little dispatch function, and you have your kind of like little microcosm right there of Redux. Now it's interesting that you can actually take something like this state and dispatch. You can create some context in React, and then you can pass through this state and the dispatcher through context to the rest of your app. And now you basically have a global state that you can manage. I've also heard some people say, well, global state is bad. I want to get away from Redux. Well, that's fine, because you can consume these at any level inside of your app. And if you don't want a massive global state, you can just create. Yeah, I don't really care about these. About people who say like, oh, but I want great performance with React or with Redux, and I want action creators and all that stuff. You can have all that stuff with the use reducer hooks anyway. So by using this pattern, you can actually create multiple instances of these. So one great way of solving, with Redux, your app will basically re-render the entire thing and fire off a bunch of listeners every time the state changes across your entire app. And they kind of get around that with memoization and selectors. But at the same time, you can get around that by just creating a bunch of provider state and dispatch pairs. So if you wanted, you could build a store for your users, your projects, your tasks, any type of resource that you want. You can place those providers at any level inside of your app, preferably the closest level to the thing that they're affecting, to make sure that you're not actually re-rendering your app when you don't need to, and that you can manage those assets separately. This is basically how Nozzle does all of its state management for non-CRUD related things. It's really nice, to be honest. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit with some examples. So on to headless UI. So does anybody who knows what headless UI actually is? I don't want this to become a talk about headless UI, but I might have to give you a little summary. So headless UI is a term for tools or libraries or any type of code that is functioned for UI, but doesn't technically render anything or provide anything like markup or styles. Who's heard of Downshift? The project Downshift? No? Well, a few people. Downshift is considered headless UI because it's not really rendering anything for you. It's merely a component that is giving you state, giving you callbacks, giving you utilities to build your own dropdown to make things easier. So headless UI in the old version of React with classes might have looked like this, where you have a bunch of render prop functions that are doing some type of work behind the scenes, but they're not actually rendering anything, they're just providing you values. Well, it turns out that this pattern was awesome at first, but now I think it's terrible. And that has proved true over the last 9 months. I haven't used the render prop since I moved to React Hooks, and I'm so happy for that. Hooks are great because you can compose them in the same scope, same block scope, synchronously. They're fantastic. You can use them immediately. So after I saw that, about 2 or 3 months into learning hooks, this is kind of how I felt. I felt like, wow, when things really get going, we're going to see some amazing tools come out. We're going to see some hooks that start doing some amazing things for us. Just like we saw great render prop components come out after they had solidified patterns around how to use them. The same thing is happening right now for hooks, I believe. Even Redux has hooks now. So that's kind of a different subject. So headless UI, at least from my perspective for Nozzle, means that we don't have any UI components. I don't import any components from the outside world that render any markup. And this is fantastic because that means I get to control all of the markup and styles in our application to be exactly how we want them to look and feel. We can control accessibility. We can control everything about them. But that doesn't mean that we're not using UI tools. This is where headless UI comes in. There are hooks, there's utilities that provide tools to help you build these complex things, right? You're not going to build your own drop-down library. You're not going to build your own date picker library. That's like programmer suicide. So I wouldn't want to. Well, actually, I did, but I didn't want to, but I felt I needed to, so I did. But it gives you total control over everything, markup and styles, and it's great because you can use the same tools that other people are using, but basically produce a final product that looks exactly how you want your brand to look. And also no more render drops, and that's fantastic. So these are the types of things that I approached with headless UI and Nozzle. Tables, forms, select boxes, date pickers, and even tooltips. And the results were great. I'm going to show you some examples of those in a minute. So just hold your horses. So side effects and performance. Hooks are great because they let you do really weird things like manage state and fire off side effects and memorize things. If you don't know what memorization is, it's a way to improve your performance and only perform certain tasks when they need to be performed. But what's great is you can take all this fancy stuff like managing state, firing off side effects, and synchronizing state and side effects and performance-driven stuff, wrap it all up into a custom hook called handle all the things, which I realized just barely, I didn't put use in front of that function. I don't think I've ever done that in my life. So handle, it should be like use all the things, I guess. But you can, once you build it and once it's solidified, you can just stick it in your code and say, hey, here's my stuff, and give me all the good stuff back. I don't have to worry about anything at all. You don't have to render any components to do that. It just looks like a function. I really need to call that use all the things. That's bothering me. So this is an example of that. Like, this was one of the very first examples I wrote when I discovered hooks, and it's called use promise, and it takes a function and manages all the state for that function. Gives you like a little refresh function that will handle cancellation of old requests, and in the end, it passes you back a response, loading, error, and refresh. So at the end of the day, you can just use it like this. Say, hey, here's my function I want you to call, and it gives me back the data, whether it's loading, error, and refresh function. This is just a very simple example of the complex things that you can hide into custom hooks and never really have to worry about again. And this is just one that I built internally to kind of play around with. Custom hooks are way more powerful than that. One of the examples I have is you might have a lot of places inside of your app. This is like for a, what is this for? Like a to-do list app, I guess, is the contrived example everybody uses. But you might have 3 separate places where you're fetching the to-dos by the user ID, and you have to bring in the user ID from some other hook, and then you're composing all these hooks. And at any point in time, if you feel like you're repeating yourself, you can just extract that logic out into a new hook and pop that in, and just use that. So your side effects and your state and all of your performance can be easily abstracted away at any point in time throughout your entire app with very little work. And that is one of the best features of hooks in my opinion. So the other great feature is that not just state and effects and everything like that, but one of the questions I get asked a lot when I say, well, I don't use Redux anymore, and they say, well, how do you like dispatch? Where does dispatch go? I realize I can get global state from any, but where's dispatch? And personally, I don't even like to see dispatch inside of my UI components. Does anybody feel similarly to that? Like anybody who's used Redux? That's kind of why they have the map dispatch to props and the action creator, things down at the bottom when you're connecting. So similarly with hooks, I didn't want to see like this reducer dispatch everywhere in my code. So I kind of made up this little name I call action hooks. And that's what you're seeing here with this use save to do. It's a custom hook I created that essentially I just call use save to do, and it gives me back a function that I can use to say what to do. Underneath the hood, I don't really care how it works. I don't care what it does. It could be dispatching to Redux. It could be calling into Apollo. It could be using anything. And it doesn't really matter. And I've already abstracted away the implementation details of all of that business logic. And so now, if I ever wanted to change stores or change providers or change anything about the way that I'm handling any of my CRUD objects or storing them or moving them around, I just have to change that use save to do function instead of changing every component that would have a dispatch inside of it. You can check that out on YouTube. I have a little video about it. Kind of fun. So here's some stats that I just straight up made up, basically how I feel. Well, everything else that's been said tonight is like way more solidified than this, so don't take me at these numbers. But I feel like generally I write about 30% less code than I used to by using React hooks. And that's just in your editor writing less code. I feel like my components are smaller, my hooks are more succinct. But this is something that is actually fairly accurate. Is after we refactored Nozzle to React hooks, I did see a 20% bundle decrease, which could have been two things. It was probably both. One of them was that there are less lines of code to achieve the same things. But the second one too is that hooks compress slightly better than classes do, which is interesting. I don't necessarily know what the ratio is there, but that does happen. I removed about 10 external libraries. That was really fun. I love slashing dependencies. That was a good day. And we have less bugs, less usability bugs, right? Meaning things just work. Whereas before it was like, oh, that thing's not working. Crap. I swear I just worked on that yesterday and now it's not working again. I don't run into that as much anymore, and as soon as I adopt TypeScript, it'll be a lot less. But I want to talk a little bit about the ESLint plugin really quick. If you're using hooks, you need to be using the ESLint plugin. It comes default with Create React App, but it will help protect you from yourself. It will save you from making terrible mistakes of leaving things out of your effects dependencies or your memoization dependencies. There's also another tool that I don't have listed up here, but it's by Kent CDODs, as a lot of great tools are. But it's called, what is it called? Something like Detect Runaway Effects. If you have not installed this, you should go check it out. He wrote a little tool that shims effects that will detect if they're firing over and over and over, and you would have no idea because React's trying to be very performant about firing them over and over and over. So I would install that too. Not only has it affected Nozzle, but React hooks have drastically affected all my open source work. So I'm sure everybody here has at least heard of or seen, maybe not, I don't really know, one of these libraries up here. I created and manage all these libraries and I love them dearly because it's an obsession, probably an unhealthy one. But my open source projects have really changed because of hooks. And I want to show you a few examples of how that has changed. So let's go over here. How am I doing on time? Good. All right. Hey, Nozzle, if you are an enterprise company here and you have a marketing team that probably cares about where you rank in Google, you should come talk to us. Our CEO Derek is also here in the audience, so you can find him in the bright blue teal Nozzle shirt. A little promotion there. So React Table. I've been working on the next version of React Table since hooks came out. I was actually already rewriting it to be headless but using render props, and then hooks came out and I thought, wow, I need to start over. So I did. And what's amazing now is React Table used to be 14 or 15 kilobytes, and now with tree shaking it's 4 to 9, depending on what you want to use. It's 100% headless, meaning React Table doesn't render any UI for you, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And it comes with all this awesome stuff. Let's show you a little example. What? So here's the most basic example. Yay, a table. It looks so good. Let's look at how we built it. So there's some like little styles up here, nothing special, just some borders and some padding. This is an actual table, by the way. It's not like some fake Flexbox table that some person like me wrote maybe a year ago. It's semantic HTML table now. But you can still do the Flexbox table if you want. So this is what it looks like. Can everybody see that? So you import use table from React table, and you say, hey, I want to use a table. Here's my column structure and my data, which I'm just going to get from props off of my table component. And it gives you back some awesome tools. Get table props, header groups, rows, and compare row. Now we can just start building our table, and when we build our table element, we'll put the get table props function on there to get any props that our table needs, spread them into the table. And then we'll make our header, and we'll loop over our header groups. And for every header group, we're going to create a row, and we're going to put the header group props on that row. And then we're going to loop over each header group's header cell and create a TH. Same thing, we're going to apply any header props that come with that column. And then we're going to render the header from this column. This is all going to make sense here in just a second. Then we render the T-body, which is just a collection of rows. So we loop over the rows that React table gave us back, right here. We prepare the row before we show it, because there's a lot of fancy things that are happening to make React table very performant. This is just a simple way to make it lazy. That sounds terrible. To make it just in time. Right? Just in time. Same thing, apply some props, map over the cells. We actually make a TD here and we say cell, render the cell. So this is basically our renderer. I like to call it a renderer because that's what it is. If you were to use React table, you would build your table however you want it to be. You could use styled components here, you could use whatever you want. You could arrange the things however you want. You could put your headers on the bottom of the table for all I care. I don't know. You can build pagination, things like that. But this is what it looks like for the column structure here. So we have an array of columns, which just have, each column has a header. And this is a column group, so it has subcolumns. Here's the first name header, and then the accessor is saying go get the first name value off of this row and put it right here. Same thing down here for info, very simple. And we memoize our data, so we're not re-rendering the table every single time that we render this component, and then we use it. So that is, in a nutshell, how React table works at the most basic level. And now you know how headless component works as well. You can see that we are in charge of all of the rendering and styles. And all we did was call use table to get the tools we needed to build it. There's tons of other examples that I could go over with you guys on React table, but you can probably do that on your own. Just go to, I think it's react-table.js.org, or you can just go to my GitHub and find React table, or you can Google it. I think I'm #1. Believe it or not. Lots of cool examples. In fact, I'm going to show you one more. The one that is completely unnecessary, but is super fun. This one's animated with framer motion. Anybody use framer motion here? No? Oh, framer motion is really cool. You should check it out. But if you actually randomize the columns, you can move the columns around. So that's the great thing, is when you control all of the UI and styles for something, you can do whatever the heck you want. People are like, hey, can I do infinite scrolling on your table? How do I do that? I said, I don't know. It's your markup. So you do whatever you want. Use React Virtualizer, React Window. Do whatever you want. It's great. This is React Form, another great library that I'm working on right now that uses hooks to build forms. There's a lot of other great libraries out there that do hooks for forms. I believe I have some really nice things here that they don't have around asynchronous validation and submission flow. So you guys should definitely come check this one out. But you can build an input field with a hook right here, use field. You can build a form right here with use form. And then you just kind of put your form together and everything just works. It's extremely composable. At Nozzle, we have forms that are managing 30 to 50,000 keywords and rows of data inside of the form state at any given point. So it can definitely handle the complexity of any UI that you can throw at it. And it also has very deeply nested form values as well. Lots of asynchronous validation too. React Query is another one that has basically replaced every single CRUD operation or any need for that I would have for like a normalized cache inside of my app. So if you use GraphQL or Apollo or something like that, then you can just tune out for like the next 30 seconds. I'm talking to people who use REST. Like 99% of the people on the planet still who probably use REST to communicate with those back-end guys that you never want to talk to. So React Query is just a very simple query solution that you can give it a function that returns a promise, a lot like that use promise hook that I showed you guys. But it comes with some great things built in. It has automatic caching and cache invalidation. It's got automatic retries, so if your queries fail, it will retry them for you. It does optimistic updates behind the hood, and just like Apollo and Dracula, if you've heard of those libraries, it lets you automatically invalidate queries and update query responses from your mutations. So you get to think about your REST assets as queries and mutations, just like you do in GraphQL. It's very cool. I feel like I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go fast. React Charts. I actually teased this at my last talk, and I put it into beta just for you guys. React Charts is not a hook. Sorry, I'm not going to make a headless charting library. That would be putting way too much responsibility on you guys to learn SVG and D3 and all this other stuff. So thankfully, React Charts is an actual component that you can render a chart. Pass it your data, your axes, say what kind of chart you want, and that will render the chart. I thought about what example to show you guys for React Charts, and this is a really fun one. We have a lot of charts on the page at Nozzle sometimes in our dashboarding, and our dashboards are very live, very interactive. So I built this stress test mode right here to test, let's see, we have 2,000 data elements right here. Every single chart has synced cursors and synced series highlighting, and synced tooltips. And you can see our radar down there is nice and green. So it is a very performant library. In fact, sometimes I like to pump it up here. Let's do a lot of series, 20 series, and 30 of these. So even with that, you can see we're in the green still. It does take a minute to render those charts, but only about 2 or 3 milliseconds. So React Charts, very fun, very cool. It's built with hooks through and through. The memoization pipelines of use memo and use callback in React Charts can even confuse me, but they're so cool. The fact that you can build performant libraries like this with hooks now with very little effort. Use select is a fun one. I don't really have a great example for it, but it's basically my version of downshift, but purely in hook form. So you can build let's see if I can show you right here. You build your own select component. I say this is my select. This is my select component. Here's how I want my options wrapper to look, my options. Each individual option, I can give a custom background. It's all headless. Here's the props I support on my component. And right here, I use select. I just pass it all the things, and it gives me back all the things that I need to build my own select box. And right here is where I build it. So you build this once, exactly how you want it to look and feel, and then you use it throughout the rest of your app. This thing looks so good. You know, I wish I could make it look better, but I don't have a lot of time. This is even a little multi-select one, so use select is very fun. I use that to power basically all of the select boxes on Nozzle. The last one I want to show you, I don't want you to technically go and use this right away. And in fact, I may not want you to use it at all. I called it React Location because at the time, Reach Router and React Router had not merged together. We didn't know that was going to happen. I really liked the way Reach Router handled history and handled a lot of things, but I wanted everything to be in hooks, and I'm a very impatient person, so I decided to write my own. Hey, it's got all this familiar API and query parent and URL parsing, everything that you would expect from a router. I just didn't call it React-Router, it's React-Location. But it's about the same concept. You can import a provider at the top of your app. You can match against routes. You can do match first. There's a link component. You can even do some really interesting things like let's see. One of them is under the navigate. The navigate function, the location API, navigate right here. So you can actually treat your query and your state, your location query, which is your query parameters, question mark, whatever, up in your location. You can treat all of those as almost as if they're a React state. You can functionally update them, take the old ones, spread them in, remove some of them. It really helps if you're building SaaS applications or anything that you're dealing with, like filters or anything you need to serialize into the URL. That's kind of one of the great things about it. It has hooks for matching, and yeah, that's about it. In a nutshell, hooks have basically transformed every line of code I've ever written for React in the last 9 months, and I've never felt better about my open source code, about Nozzle, and about the future of React. If you aren't using hooks, you should. And I said that 9 months ago. Now I'm saying if you aren't using hooks, I would start using them ASAP. Because coming down the pipeline, you're going to see some stuff with suspense. You're going to see suspense for data loading and React concurrent mode. And it's going to be great if you have hooks under your belt when those things come out, so you're not learning 4 new things. Yeah, my name's Tanner Linsley. Come talk to me. I will chat your ear off probably. And yeah, thanks for listening.